The television courtroom had never witnessed such a moment of pure, unfiltered arrogance meeting its absolute destruction. Karen Davidson, a 320-pound woman who had spent 5 years terrorizing small business owners with fraudulent lawsuits, sat in the defendant's chair with the kind of smug superiority that could only come from someone who had never faced real consequences. Her perfectly painted nails drummed against the armrest as she prepared to deliver the insult that would bankrupt her completely and turn her into the most hated woman on the internet. The words were forming on her lips, her mouth opening to speak, completely unaware that Judge Judy Hub had spent the previous night uncovering a pattern of fraud so extensive it would trigger criminal investigations across 3 states. Maybe you should mind your menopause, Judge, because you're clearly too emotional to understand basic property law. The silence that followed was nuclear. Every person in that courtroom felt the atmosphere shift from professional proceedings to something far more dangerous. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed into the kind of death stare that had made seasoned attorneys break down on national television. But what happened next would cost Karen Davidson $50,000, her home, her freedom, and every shred of dignity she had left. Before we show you the exact moment Judge Judy destroyed this professional scammer's entire life, you need to understand who these people really were and what brought them to this explosive confrontation. Because this wasn't just about one insult or one lawsuit. This was about a calculated predator who had weaponized discrimination laws to extort over $100,000 from immigrant business owners, and the television judge who finally had enough evidence to expose her fraud to millions of viewers. Hit that like button right now if you're ready to see the most satisfying courtroom destruction in television history. And make sure you subscribe because what Judge Judy reveals about Karen's criminal pattern will absolutely shock you to your core. Trust me, the next 25 minutes will restore your faith in justice and prove that karma always catches up, even to people who think they've mastered the system. Karen Davidson had perfected the art of professional victimhood over 5 brutal years. At 47 years old, she had transformed her weight into both a weapon and a shield, using claims of discrimination to extract settlements from businesses too small to fight back. She would roll into establishments on her mobility scooter, despite multiple doctors confirming she had no physical limitations requiring assistance, and immediately begin documenting everything with her phone camera. The pattern was always the same. She would join a gym, demand specialized equipment rated for 500 pounds, and when the small business owner explained insurance limitations or structural concerns, she would explode with accusations of fat phobia and discrimination. Within days, negative reviews would flood their social media pages. Within weeks, a lawsuit would arrive demanding anywhere from $15,000 to $50,000 in damages for emotional distress and humiliation. What made Karen truly dangerous was her knowledge of exactly how much it cost small businesses to defend themselves in court. She had worked as a paralegal before being fired after 6 complaints about creating a hostile work environment, and she had learned that most business owners would settle for $10,000 to $15,000 rather than spend $20,000 on legal fees with no guarantee of winning. She had filed 23 lawsuits in 5 years against gyms, restaurants, clothing stores, airlines, and movie theaters. 11 of those businesses had settled, paying her a combined total of $127,000. She was making 6 figures annually by deliberately creating situations where she could claim discrimination, and she had gotten away with it because each business saw her as an isolated problem rather than part of a calculated pattern. Her victims were always the same type. Immigrant business owners living the American dream. People who had worked multiple jobs to save enough money to open their own establishments. People who couldn't afford prolonged legal battles and who feared that fighting back would make them look like they were discriminating against someone with legitimate grievances. Karen had an instinct for identifying the most vulnerable targets, the people who would be most afraid to fight back, the people who would pay quietly just to make the nightmare end. She kept detailed files on every business in her area, noting their financial situations, their customer demographics, their online presence. She was a predator in every sense of the word, and she had been hunting successfully for 5 years without anyone connecting the dots between her various lawsuits. But Karen had finally made a fatal mistake. She had targeted Marcus Chen, a 34-year-old gym owner who had built FitLife Gym from absolutely nothing. Marcus was different from her previous victims in one crucial way. He refused to be another statistic in her pattern of fraud. When Karen had joined his gym and immediately demanded equipment modifications that would cost $40,000, Marcus had tried to work with her reasonably. He offered modified equipment, personal training sessions, flexible hours, anything that would accommodate her within his actual capabilities. Karen had responded to every reasonable offer with escalating demands, and when Marcus finally said he couldn't meet her requirements, she had sent him an email that would become the smoking gun in her destruction. "Just pay me $50,000 or I'll destroy your business online." That single email, that moment of arrogance where she put her extortion attempt in writing, had given Marcus the evidence he needed to fight back. Marcus Chen had spent 14 months living in absolute hell, watching the business he built with his own hands crumble under Karen Davidson's relentless assault. He had immigrated from Taiwan at age 16 with his parents, speaking almost no English, working 3 jobs while finishing high school just to help his family survive. By 25, he had saved enough money to attend community college for business management. By 30, he had scraped together the down payment for a small commercial space in a working-class neighborhood. By 33, FitLife Gym was thriving, offering affordable memberships to families who couldn't afford the fancy corporate gyms across town. Marcus had built something beautiful, a place where single mothers could work out while their kids played in the childcare area, where elderly immigrants practiced Tai Chi in the mornings, where teenagers learned discipline through martial arts classes. He had a 4.9-star rating across every review platform. He offered free memberships to low-income families. He was living his American dream, providing for his pregnant wife and their 3-year-old son, planning to expand to a second location. Then Karen Davidson walked through his door, and everything turned into a nightmare he couldn't escape. The lawsuit had arrived 6 weeks after that email, and despite having clear evidence of her extortion attempt, Marcus quickly learned that the legal system didn't move fast or cheap. He spent $18,000 on attorneys just to get through the preliminary hearings. Karen's lawyer, a notorious ambulance chaser who handled all 23 of her lawsuits, knew exactly how to drag out proceedings, filing motion after motion, demanding discovery that cost Marcus thousands more in legal fees. Meanwhile, Karen had launched a coordinated attack on every platform where FitLife Gym had a presence. 1-star reviews flooded in, many from fake accounts, all claiming discrimination and fat phobia. She posted in local Facebook groups about how Marcus had humiliated her in front of other gym members, a complete fabrication that nonetheless damaged his reputation. Membership dropped by 40% within 3 months. Families who had been loyal for years started questioning whether they wanted to support a business accused of discrimination. Marcus's wife, 8 months pregnant with their second child, cried herself to sleep worrying about losing everything they had built. But Marcus Chen possessed something that Karen's previous victims hadn't. He possessed absolute certainty that he had done nothing wrong, and he possessed the stubborn determination that had carried him from teenage immigrant to successful business owner. Instead of settling, instead of giving Karen the payoff she expected, Marcus hired a private investigator. That decision changed everything. Within 2 weeks, the investigator had uncovered Karen's full pattern of lawsuits. The same complaints filed against different businesses. The same lawyer representing her in every case. The settlement amounts that were always just low enough to make fighting back seem more expensive than paying. The social media posts where Karen had bragged to friends about her income from lawsuits, including one particularly damning post where she wrote, "These idiots always settle LOL, easiest money I've ever made." Marcus had found a pattern, but he needed a platform big enough to expose it. He needed someone with the authority and the audience to make sure Karen couldn't just move on to her next victim. That's when Marcus's lawyer had a connection that seemed almost too good to be true. A producer for Judge Judy's show who was looking for cases involving small business owners fighting back against fraudulent claims. Marcus submitted his evidence, expecting nothing, hoping for a miracle. 3 weeks later, he received the call that would change his life. Judge Judy Schindlin herself had reviewed his case, and she wanted it on her show. But there was something else, something the producer said that gave Marcus the first real hope he'd felt in months. Judge Judy doesn't just hear cases. She investigates them. And when she finds fraud, she destroys it completely. Marcus had no idea just how thoroughly Judge Judy was about to dismantle Karen's entire operation. Judge Judy Schindlin had built her legendary reputation on one unshakable foundation. She could spot a liar within 30 seconds of them opening their mouth, and she had zero tolerance for people who abused the legal system to hurt innocent people. At 78 years old, after 25 years as a family court judge in Manhattan handling over 20,000 cases, she had developed what colleagues called a supernatural ability to identify patterns of fraud and manipulation. When Marcus Chen's case landed on her desk, every instinct she had started screaming that this was bigger than one lawsuit. She assigned her research team to dig deeper than they had ever dug before, and what they uncovered made her blood boil with righteous fury. This wasn't just about one gym owner being targeted. This was about a serial predator who had been weaponizing discrimination laws to destroy vulnerable people for profit. Judge Judy's team worked for 3 solid weeks building an airtight case against Karen Davidson. They contacted every business Karen had sued, and 11 of them confirmed they had settled rather than fight. They obtained security footage from 4 different establishments showing Karen walking normally without any assistance, directly contradicting her claims of physical limitations. They subpoenaed her medical records with her own legal consent, since she had put her health conditions at issue by filing discrimination claims based on disability. Those records revealed that multiple doctors had told her she had no physical limitations requiring mobility aids and that she had refused every treatment recommendation for weight management. They found her social media history, including posts she thought she had deleted, where she discussed targeting small businesses and bragged about her settlement income. They interviewed neighbors who described her as calculating and manipulative, people who had watched her walk to her car without assistance and then used the mobility scooter for public appearances. But the most damaging evidence came from Karen's own financial records. Judge Judy's team tracked every settlement payment, every lawsuit filing, every business she had targeted. The pattern was undeniable and devastating. Karen had made $127,000 in 5 years from settlements alone. She had no other reported income. She was a professional lawsuit filer who had turned discrimination claims into a full-time career. Judge Judy had seen scammers before, but Karen Davidson represented something particularly disgusting to her. She was hurting real victims of discrimination by making their claims seem less credible. She was destroying immigrant families who had worked their entire lives to build something. She was exploiting legal protections designed to help vulnerable people, turning those protections into weapons of extortion. Judge Judy decided that this case would be the one where she made an example so devastating that it would be remembered for years. The Judge Judy courtroom buzzed with its usual electric energy as cameras rolled live, capturing what everyone assumed would be another routine small claims case for millions of Americans to witness from their living rooms. Production assistants made their final checks, the bailiff took his position, and the audience settled in expecting the typical drama they had come to love. Nobody in that room had any clue they were about to witness television history in the making. Karen Davidson rolled into the courtroom on her mobility scooter with all the theatrical flair of a performer taking the stage. She was dressed in an oversized muumuu covered in body-positive slogans, her blonde hair freshly highlighted, her makeup applied with the precision of someone who knew the cameras would be on her. She carried 3 bulging folders of what she called evidence, mostly internet printouts from legal advice websites and disability rights blogs. The smirk on her face told everyone watching that she believed she had already won this case before speaking a single word. Her assistant helped her transfer from the scooter to the defendant's chair with exaggerated difficulty, a performance designed to emphasize her claimed physical limitations. Karen shot confident glances at the cameras, already imagining herself going viral for all the right reasons, already counting the $50,000 she expected to extract from Marcus Chen. Marcus sat quietly in the plaintiff's chair, his pregnant wife beside him, both of them clutching the folder of security footage and evidence that represented their last hope to save everything they had built. Across the courtroom aisle, Karen's presence seemed to fill the entire space with aggressive entitlement. She kept muttering loud enough for the microphones to pick up, saying things like, "This should be quick," and "Some people just don't understand civil rights." The gallery was packed with gym members who had come to support Marcus, other small business owners who had settled with Karen, and people who had heard about the case through social media buzz. The atmosphere felt different from typical Judge Judy episodes, heavier somehow, like everyone could sense something significant was about to unfold. Judge Judy reviewed her notes one final time, that slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth, the smile that experienced viewers recognized as the calm before a devastating storm. Judge Judy opened the proceedings with her signature no-nonsense approach, her voice cutting through the courtroom air with surgical precision. "Mr. Chen, you're suing Miss Davidson for filing a fraudulent lawsuit against your gym. Miss Davidson, you're countersuing for $50,000 claiming disability discrimination. Let's start with you, Miss Davidson. Tell me about what happened at FitLife Gym." Karen didn't just answer the question. She launched into a theatrical performance that would have embarrassed community theater actors. "Your Honor, this man completely humiliated me in front of other gym members by refusing to accommodate my disability." She began, her voice dripping with practiced victimhood. "I have severe mobility limitations that require specialized equipment, and when I simply asked for reasonable accommodations as required by law, he told me I was too fat for his gym." The lie was so blatant, so perfectly delivered, that it was clear she had told this same story many times before. But then Karen made her first critical mistake. Instead of sticking to the facts, she started editorializing, rolling her eyes dramatically at Marcus and adding commentary like, as anyone who understands disability law would know, and, obviously he has no respect for people with my condition. Judge Judy's eyebrows raised slightly, the first warning sign that experienced courtroom observers knew meant trouble was brewing. "Miss Davidson," she interrupted, her tone still professional but with an edge sharp enough to cut through steel. "I didn't ask for your legal analysis. I asked what happened. Tell me the facts without the commentary." The audience could feel the shift in energy, that moment before lightning strikes when the air becomes charged with electricity. But Karen, blinded by 5 years of successful manipulation, completely missed the warning. Instead of backing down and adjusting her approach, she doubled down on her disrespect. She let out an exaggerated sigh, the kind reserved for dealing with incompetent customer service representatives, and said with unmistakable condescension, "Well, if you'll let me finish my story, Your Honor, I was trying to explain the legal context that's clearly relevant here." The courtroom went absolutely silent. Even the camera operators seemed to freeze in place. The bailiff's hand moved slightly closer to his position, instinctively preparing for whatever was about to happen. Marcus's wife squeezed her husband's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Judge Judy leaned forward in her chair, her famous steely gaze locking onto Karen like a heat-seeking missile that had just acquired its target. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dropping to that dangerously quiet tone that made seasoned attorneys break out in cold sweats. "Did you just sigh at me in my courtroom? Did you just suggest that I don't understand what's relevant?" The question hung in the air like a sword suspended by a thread, ready to fall and sever everything in its path. Karen, incredibly, seemed to think this was still going according to her plan. She had no idea she had just lit the fuse on a legal bomb that was about to explode in her face and destroy everything she had built over 5 years of fraudulent lawsuits. What happened next would become the most viral courtroom moment in internet history, shared across every platform, watched by over 50 million people, and studied in law schools as an example of what happens when arrogance meets expertise. Karen Davidson actually smirked at Judge Judy. Not just a little smile, but a full condescending smirk that screamed her belief that she was smarter than everyone in the room. She turned slightly toward the audience as if she was about to share an inside joke with them about how unreasonable this judge was being, how she clearly didn't understand the complexities of disability discrimination law. Judge Judy's response was swift and surgical, her voice carrying the weight of 25 years of judicial authority and exactly zero patience for manipulative liars. "Miss Davidson, let me ask you some simple questions, and I want simple answers. How many gyms have you joined in the past 5 years?" Karen's confident expression flickered for just a moment. "Maybe 4 or 5, I don't keep track." Judge Judy's eyes never left her face. "How many of those gyms did you use?" Karen shifted in her chair. "That's not relevant to this case." Judge Judy's voice went even colder. "Answer the question. How many businesses have you filed lawsuits against in the past 5 years?" Karen's face was starting to show the first signs of real concern, the realization that someone had done their homework, that this wasn't going to be the easy victory she had anticipated. The tension in the courtroom was building like a pressure cooker about to explode, and Karen made the catastrophic decision to go on the offensive rather than retreat. She sat up straighter in her chair, her voice taking on an aggressive edge. "Your Honor, I don't appreciate the hostile tone. I'm here because I was discriminated against, and you seem more interested in attacking me than hearing about the discrimination I faced. Those businesses I sued all deserved it. They all violated the law. I'm an advocate for people with disabilities, and I won't apologize for standing up for my rights." Judge Judy's smile grew wider, and anyone who had watched her show for more than 5 minutes knew that smile meant someone was about to be utterly destroyed. "Miss Davidson, isn't it true that you've made over $127,000 in lawsuit settlements in the past 5 years? The color drained from Karen's face so fast it was visible even through her heavy makeup. She hadn't expected Judge Judy to have specific numbers. She hadn't expected anyone to connect all her separate cases into one damning pattern. Karen's panic manifested as aggression, her voice rising to a near shout. "You don't understand what it's like to be discriminated against every single day. You don't understand the emotional toll of living in a society that hates people who look like me. You're sitting up there in your position of privilege, judging me without understanding anything about my life." Judge Judy's expression remained completely controlled, but her voice carried an unmistakable warning. "Miss Davidson, I suggest you lower your voice and show some respect in my courtroom." But Karen had passed the point of rational thinking. She had spent 5 years having her tactics work perfectly, 5 years of judges and business owners backing down when she raised her voice and claimed victimhood. She genuinely believed that the same approach would work here, that if she just pushed hard enough, Judge Judy would retreat like everyone else had. She was about to learn the most expensive lesson of her life. Karen stood up from her chair without any assistance whatsoever, completely forgetting that she was supposed to have severe mobility limitations, her finger pointing directly at Judge Judy as she prepared to deliver the insult that would cost her absolutely everything. Karen Davidson's voice filled the courtroom with venomous contempt as she pointed her finger directly at Judge Judy Schindlin, every word dripping with the arrogance of someone who had never faced real consequences. "You know what your problem is, Judge. You're just an angry old woman who can't stand that people like me won't be silenced anymore. We have rights, and you can't handle it because you come from a generation that thinks people should just shut up and accept discrimination." Judge Judy's final warning came in a voice so cold it could freeze water. "Miss Davidson, sit down immediately, or I will hold you in contempt of court." But Karen was too far gone, too convinced of her own invincibility, too drunk on 5 years of successful manipulation to recognize the cliff edge she was standing on. Her next words would be replayed millions of times across every social media platform, becoming the most infamous courtroom insult in television history. "Or what, Judge? Maybe you should mind your menopause, because you're clearly too emotional and hormonal to understand basic property law." The words seemed to echo in the sudden vacuum of silence that followed. Karen actually smirked at the cameras, believing she had just delivered a devastating blow, thinking she had exposed Judge Judy as biased and incompetent. She had no idea that she had just committed professional suicide on national television. The transformation in Judge Judy's demeanor was subtle but absolutely terrifying to anyone who recognized the signs. She slowly rose from her chair, something she almost never did during proceedings, her movements deliberate and controlled. Her voice, when she spoke, was deadly calm, the kind of calm that precedes complete annihilation. "Miss Davidson, you have just made the worst mistake of your entire life. In 35 years of practicing law, I have dealt with thousands of liars, con artists, and frauds. But you represent something particularly disgusting. You weaponize real discrimination to line your pockets. You target vulnerable immigrant families. You fake disabilities and mock people with genuine limitations. And now you have the audacity to insult me in my courtroom." Karen's smirk was beginning to fade as she watched Judge Judy reach for a thick manila folder marked with her full legal name in bold red letters. The judge's next words sent visible shock waves through Karen's body. "Let's talk about your advocacy work, Miss Davidson. Let's talk about your pattern of behavior over the past 5 years." Judge Judy opened the folder with theatrical precision, pulling out document after document, each one another nail in Karen's coffin. She began reading with the methodical efficiency of a prosecutor delivering a closing argument. 19 gyms, restaurants, and clothing stores sued between 2019 and 2024. Same lawyer representing you in every single case. Similar complaints filed in each lawsuit. 11 settlements totaling $127,000. 0 cases actually taken to trial because you always settle when businesses start fighting back. Karen tried to interrupt, her voice cracking with the first hints of genuine fear. "Your Honor, those are all legitimate cases of discrimination. Those businesses violated my rights." Judge Judy's response was instantaneous and brutal. "Be quiet, Miss Davidson. I'm not finished destroying your lies, and you will not interrupt me again." The audience gasped at the raw authority in her voice, the absolute refusal to tolerate any more of Karen's manipulation. Judge Judy continued, pulling out more evidence with devastating precision. "Let's look at the medical records you put into evidence when you filed this lawsuit claiming disability. Multiple doctors have stated in writing that you have no physical limitations requiring mobility assistance. Dr. Martinez at County Medical wrote, and I quote, 'The patient has full range of motion and mobility but refuses to engage with any treatment recommendations for weight management. Patient appear to use mobility scooters for convenience rather than medical necessity.'" Karen's face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray color as Judge Judy systematically dismantled every lie she had told. But the judge wasn't finished. She pulled out a stack of photographs, holding them up for the cameras to capture clearly. These are security camera images from 4 different establishments you sued, Miss Davidson. Here you are at Marcus Chen's gym, walking from your car to the entrance with no mobility assistance. Here you are inside the gym, testing equipment, walking normally, showing no signs of physical limitation. And here, this is my personal favorite, here you are deliberately positioning yourself to create a confrontation that you could record on your phone. This wasn't discrimination, Miss Davidson. This was a setup. This was a fraud. Karen was visibly shaking now, her hands gripping the table in front of her as her carefully constructed world collapsed around her. She tried one more desperate deflection. That footage is out of context. You can't use that against me. Judge Judy's laugh was cold and humorless. Out of context? Really? Should we discuss the context of your social media posts, then? The judge pulled out printed screenshots, each one more damaging than the last. Here's a Facebook post from 6 months ago where you wrote to a friend, and again I quote, "Just got another settlement, $15,000 from that Chinese restaurant owner who couldn't afford to fight. These idiots always settle LOL. Easiest money I've ever made." Karen's face crumpled as she realized the extent of the investigation, the thoroughness of Judge Judy's preparation. The judge wasn't finished. Here's another post where you discuss targeting small businesses specifically because, in your words, they're too scared and too broke to fight back in court. Here's a message thread where you discuss which businesses in your area might be good targets next. Here's a post where you brag about making 6 figures annually from settlements. The courtroom was completely silent except for Judge Judy's voice, delivering evidence like hammer blows. Karen tried one last desperate play, her voice breaking into sobs that looked and sounded completely fake to everyone watching. "Please, Your Honor, this isn't fair. You're twisting everything. I'm the victim here. I'm the one who has been discriminated against my whole life." Judge Judy's response shut down the performance immediately. "Save your tears, Miss Davidson. I've seen real victims in my courtroom, and you are not one of them. Real victims don't make 6 figures exploiting discrimination laws. Real victims don't brag on social media about their settlement income. Real victims don't target vulnerable immigrant families for profit." The judge turned to Marcus Chen, her voice softening slightly as she addressed him. "Mr. Chen, please present your evidence for the court." Marcus stood, his hands trembling as he pulled out his own folder. He explained how Karen had joined his gym specifically to target it, how she had escalated her demands despite his reasonable accommodation offers, and then he presented the smoking gun. The email Karen had sent him demanding $50,000 with the explicit threat to destroy his business online if he didn't pay. Judge Judy read the email aloud, her voice filled with disgust. "Just pay me $50,000 or I'll destroy your business online. This isn't a discrimination claim, Miss Davidson. This is extortion. This is blackmail. This is criminal behavior." Karen was openly crying now, real tears this time, as she realized that everything was falling apart, that her 5-year scam had finally been exposed to millions of viewers who would never let her forget this moment. Judge Judy called for one final piece of evidence that would seal Karen's fate completely. The judge had subpoenaed Karen's financial records, and the pattern they revealed was absolutely damning. No reported employment income for 5 years. No legitimate business ventures. Just settlement payments, month after month, from small businesses that had paid rather than fight. The evidence was overwhelming, undeniable, and completely devastating. Karen's lawyer, sensing the complete disaster unfolding, tried to make a weak objection about relevance, but Judge Judy shut him down immediately. "Your client put her credibility at issue when she filed this lawsuit. She put her financial situation at issue when she claimed damages. She put her disability claims at issue when she sued for discrimination. Everything I've presented is directly relevant to this case, counselor, and if you object one more time without legal basis, I'll sanction you as well." The lawyer sat down quickly, clearly wanting no part of the destruction happening to his client. Karen sat slumped in her chair, no longer even pretending to have mobility issues, her entire fraudulent empire crumbling in real time on national television as Judge Judy prepared to deliver a ruling that would change her life forever. Judge Judy stood at her bench with the bearing of someone who had waited years for exactly this moment, the opportunity to make an example so devastating that it would be remembered long after her final episode aired. Her voice carried the weight of absolute authority as she prepared to deliver a ruling that would bankrupt Karen Davidson completely and restore justice to every small business owner she had terrorized. Miss Davidson, in all my years on the bench, I have encountered some truly despicable people. But you represent a special kind of evil. You exploit laws designed to protect vulnerable people. You weaponize legitimate social issues for personal profit. You destroy families who have worked their entire lives to build something meaningful. You are not an advocate. You are a predator. And your predatory behavior ends today. The courtroom held its collective breath as Judge Judy continued, each word landing like a judicial sledgehammer. I find in favor of the plaintiff, Marcus Chen, on all counts. Miss Davidson, you will pay Mr. Chen $50,000 for filing a fraudulent and malicious lawsuit against his business. You will pay an additional $18,000 to reimburse him for every penny of legal fees he incurred defending himself against your extortion scheme. Total judgment, $68,000, due immediately. Karen's shriek pierced through the courtroom like a siren. I don't have that kind of money. I can't pay that. You can't do this to me. Judge Judy's smile was absolutely merciless. Then you will liquidate your assets, Miss Davidson. Your house, your car, your mobility scooter that you don't actually need, everything you own will be sold to pay this judgment. And if that's not enough, your wages will be garnished for the rest of your working life until every penny is paid. But Judge Judy wasn't finished delivering consequences. She had one more devastating blow to deliver. Furthermore, I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. The evidence presented today suggests fraud, extortion, perjury, and conspiracy to commit wire fraud. If prosecuted and convicted, Miss Davidson, you are looking at 5 to 7 years in state prison. Karen collapsed back into her chair, hyperventilating, her face a mask of absolute horror as the reality of her situation finally penetrated her thick armor of entitlement. The woman who had walked into the courtroom expecting an easy $50,000 payday was now facing bankruptcy and potential prison time. Judge Judy had saved her most devastating blow for last, the one that would ensure Karen could never simply move to another city and restart her scam. I am also releasing my research team's complete findings to every business you have sued in the past 5 years. They will be notified that they have grounds to file countersuits to recover their settlement payments, as those payments were obtained through fraud. Based on the evidence we've compiled, Miss Davidson, you could be facing over $500,000 in total liability from civil suits alone. Karen tried to speak, but only incoherent sounds came out. Her carefully constructed world had been completely destroyed in less than 30 minutes. Judge Judy delivered her final statement with the cold satisfaction of justice perfectly served. You came into my courtroom thinking you could manipulate me the way you've manipulated everyone else. You thought calling me emotional and hormonal would intimidate me into backing down. Instead, you gave me the motivation to ensure that your fraud is exposed to the widest possible audience. Millions of people are watching this right now, Miss Davidson. Your face, your name, your pattern of behavior will be shared across every platform. You will never be able to run this scam again. This is what happens when consequences finally catch up with people who think they're untouchable. Marcus Chen stood, tears streaming down his face, barely able to speak through his overwhelming relief. Thank you, Your Honor. You saved my business. You saved my family. You saved my life. Judge Judy's expression softened slightly as she addressed him. Mr. Chen, you did something incredibly brave by refusing to settle and by fighting back. Go take care of your gym, take care of your family, and know that you've helped protect every other small business owner from becoming her next victim. Marcus's pregnant wife was openly sobbing, hugging her husband, the weight of 14 months of terror finally lifting from their shoulders. The gallery erupted in spontaneous applause, something that rarely happened in Judge Judy's courtroom, but the judge allowed it this time. Karen was being escorted out by bailiffs, still crying, still screaming about how unfair everything was, how she was the real victim, how nobody understood her pain. Her last visible moment on camera showed her face twisted in anguish, the perfect encapsulation of entitled arrogance meeting absolute accountability. Within 1 hour of the episode airing, the clip of Karen's menopause insult had already hit 500,000 views on social media. Within 3 hours, it had crossed 2 million. By the end of the first day, over 15 million people had watched Karen Davidson's complete destruction across YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, and Instagram. The hashtag #MindYourMenopause began trending worldwide, but not in the way Karen could have ever imagined. It became a rallying cry against entitled behavior, a shorthand for the moment when arrogance meets consequences. Meme creators had an absolute field day. GIFs of Judge Judy's death stare were shared millions of times. Reaction videos flooded every platform. Legal analysts appeared on news programs discussing the case and praising Judge Judy's thorough investigation. The story was picked up by major news outlets, with headlines like "Television Judge Exposes Serial Lawsuit Scammer and Fraudulent Discrimination Claims Cost Woman Everything," running across multiple networks. The real-world consequences for Karen Davidson were swift and absolutely merciless. Within 1 week, her bank accounts had been frozen pending the judgment payment. Within 2 weeks, she had been evicted from her apartment after her landlord saw the episode and exercised a clause about criminal activity. Within 1 month, 11 of the businesses she had previously sued had filed countersuits demanding return of their settlement payments plus damages. The criminal investigation moved forward rapidly, with prosecutors citing Judge Judy's evidence as the foundation of their case. 6 months later, Karen Davidson was convicted on 8 counts of fraud and sentenced to 4 years in state prison. She was ordered to pay full restitution to all her victims, a sum totaling over $400,000 that would follow her for the rest of her life. Her mobility scooter was seized and sold at auction, with proceeds going to Marcus Chen. Her house was foreclosed. Her car was repossessed. Everything she had gained through 5 years of fraudulent lawsuits was stripped away, leaving her with nothing but a prison sentence and the eternal shame of being the most hated woman on the internet. Marcus Chen's life transformed in the opposite direction. His gym membership increased by 300% within 2 months as people joined specifically to support him after seeing the episode. A GoFundMe campaign raised over $150,000 to help him expand his business and cover the costs Karen had inflicted. He opened 2 additional locations within a year, each one dedicated to providing affordable fitness options for working families. He and his wife welcomed their daughter, whom they named Judy in honor of the judge who had saved their lives. Marcus became a vocal advocate for small business owners, speaking at conferences about the importance of fighting back against fraudulent lawsuits and never letting bullies win through intimidation. The case became a landmark moment studied in law schools across the country as an example of vexatious litigation and the importance of thorough investigation. Judge Judy's episode became her most watched ever, and she frequently cited it as one of the most satisfying cases of her entire career. The cultural impact extended far beyond one courtroom and one viral video. Businesses across the country began implementing new protocols for identifying patterns of fraudulent claims. Legal organizations created databases to track vexatious litigants, making it harder for people like Karen to move from victim to victim without detection. Legitimate disability rights organizations publicly condemned Karen's behavior, emphasizing how her fraud damaged the credibility of real discrimination claims and made it harder for genuine victims to seek justice. The body positivity movement distanced itself completely from her actions, with major advocates writing articles about how weaponizing social justice for personal profit betrays everything those movements stand for. Karen Davidson became a cautionary tale, a symbol of what happens when entitlement meets accountability, when arrogance encounters expertise, when someone finally says enough and has the evidence to back it up. Her one insult, those few words telling Judge Judy to mind her menopause, cost her $50,000 in immediate judgment, over $400,000 in total liability, 4 years of freedom, and any shred of dignity she had left. If you believe Karen Davidson got exactly what she deserved for her years of fraud and her outrageous disrespect, smash that like button right now. Comment "Justice served" if you think Judge Judy delivered the most satisfying courtroom destruction in television history. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss another moment where entitled people learn that consequences are real and accountability is inevitable. Share this video with anyone who needs to see what happens when arrogance meets its match. Remember, respect costs nothing, but disrespect can cost you absolutely everything. Karen Davidson walked into that courtroom thinking one insult would intimidate a judge into backing down. Instead, it triggered the most thorough investigation and devastating ruling of Judge Judy's legendary career. All because she couldn't control her arrogance for just 5 more minutes. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video where another entitled person learns this exact same lesson the hard way.